Good morning and welcome to Balham Baptist Church online. In Isaiah 41 and verse 10, God says, "Do not be afraid, for I am with you." It's a promise that's repeated many, many times throughout the Bible. Fear and injustice have sadly been an all too common thread across our world recently. And so this morning you join us on a new series as we understand what that means when God says, "Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid, for I am with you." We'll also be hearing a reflection from Andy as he looks back on the events of recent weeks. But for now, we're going to go to Jenny, who will be bringing us our reading.
The reading today is taken from Psalms 121, verses 1 to 8. The Lord our protector. I look to the mountains. Where will my help come from? My help will come from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not let you fall. Your protector is always awake. The protector of Israel never dozes or sleeps. The Lord will guard you. He is by your side to protect you. The sun will not hurt you during the day, nor the moon during the night. The Lord will protect you from all danger. He will keep you safe. He will protect you as you come and go, now and forever. Amen.
In times like this, I'm reminded of the story of Moses in the Bible. Moses sees the oppression and the injustice that the Israelites are suffering at the hands of the Egyptians. And he has to witness that every day of his life. He looks and he sees his people being oppressed, his people being treated unfairly, his people being treated like animals, like their lives do not matter. And it is infuriating for Moses. And he is angry. And he is fed up. And at one point, he reacts to that anger by lashing out at an Egyptian who he sees again oppressing his people. And he lashes out at him. He's had enough. And he strikes the Egyptian and he kills him. And when I look at the events around the world, I see a lot of people who feel the rage that Moses felt. And if I'm honest, I feel that rage and that anger as well. Anger about the injustice, the oppression, the stench of racism that just won't go away. And the death of George Floyd has highlighted what we all know has been going on. And it's easy to point the finger at America and say, oh, they need to sort their stuff out. But we know that right here on our doorstep that the problem, the stench of racism is very real too. And like Moses, the anger is raw and it is bordering on rage. Especially as you see the lack of remorse and the lack of compassion that exists and the unwillingness to change and the token gestures that are offered without anything tangible that lies behind it. The pain for a lot of people is very, very real. But as I took in the events of the world this week and as I felt my mood changing and my anger growing, I was reminded about a verse in Ephesians, Paul's advice to that church where he says, in your anger, do not sin. Don't give the devil a foothold. Because the temptation, like it was for Moses, is to lash out. Is to lash out. And we can see a lot of people around the world, they are lashing out because they are angry. And for myself, the lashing out comes in the form of bitterness and resentment. And sometimes even bordering on hatred. hatred towards people who behave a certain way, hatred towards people who think a certain way, hatred towards people who vote a certain way, hatred towards elements of the church who should know better, but through their actions and their ignorance put people in power that promote the existence of racism and prejudice and injustice. And that is the temptation. Because the trick of the devil is to try to convince us that everyone is our enemy, when in reality, he's the only one who is. And so I've learned this lesson, that God has a plan even for our rage, and even for our anger, and even for our frustration. That God has a plan even for that. Because when Moses felt the anger in his heart towards the Egyptians for the way that his people were being oppressed, God had a plan for that anger. He just needed to bring it to God. And I know right now many are hurting, and many are angry, and many are in pain, and many are frustrated by what they see in the world. And it feels hopeless, and it feels draining, and it feels like stuff never changes. But I just want to say, take that anger, take that pain, take that frustration to God and ask Him, Lord, what do you want me to do with this? This anger that I feel, this pain that I feel, this frustration that I feel, this hopelessness that I feel. What do you want me to do with it? Because God has a plan, even for our anger, even for our pain. And God is love. He's not enjoying what he's seeing either. And he's the only one who can do something about it. So trust him. Trust him.
How much longer, Lord? Will you forget about me? Will it be forever? How long will you hide? How long must I be confused and miserable all day? How long will my enemies keep beating me down? Please listen, Lord God, and answer my prayers. Make my eyes sparkle again, or else I will fall into the sleep of death. My enemies will say, now we've won. They will be greatly pleased when I'm defeated. I trust your love, and I feel like celebrating because you rescued me. You have been good to me, Lord, and I will sing about you.
I'll raise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemies. I'll raise a hallelujah louder than the unbelief. I'll raise a hallelujah. My weapon is a melody. I'll raise a hallelujah. Heaven comes to fight for me. I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King of my enemies, I raise a hallelujah. Louder than the unbelief, I raise a hallelujah. My weapon is the melody, I raise a hallelujah. Heaven comes to fight for me.
Don't be afraid. How many times have you heard that phrase? Our parents said it to us all the time. Don't be afraid of going to the dentist. Don't be afraid on your first day of school. Don't be afraid when you first hold a live animal. Don't be afraid when you go to the firework display. Or is that just me? I've always been frightened of fireworks. What are you afraid of? What scares you? What brings fear out in you? Apparently in the Bible, the phrase "do not be afraid" appears 365 times. In a number of key situations where people are asked to do things, God says to them, do not be afraid. Abraham, the father of the Jewish nation, was told as he was asked to take on that task, do not be afraid. Moses, when asked to lead the people of Israel out of slavery, was told, do not be afraid. Moses himself then, when he leads the people and they're escaping from their situation, they get up to the edge of the Red Sea, and Moses said to them, be still, do not be afraid. And they were about to cross the Red Sea. Think about Mary in the New Testament, when the angel comes to her and is about to ask her or tell her that she's chosen as the one who's going to bring the Saviour into the world. And the angel says, do not be afraid, Mary. Do not be afraid. But if you were asked to do any of their tasks, would you not be absolutely terrified? If you were told that you were going to father a whole nation, would you not be terrified? If you were told that you were going to lead a nation out of slavery, would you not be terrified? If you were told that you were going to bring the Saviour of the world into this world, would you not be terrified? It seems to me that it's like saying to somebody, do not be afraid, is like saying to a drowning man, don't panic. Well, if you say to somebody, don't panic, they might think, well, I wasn't panicking, but now I am. Do not be afraid. So often fear grips us when we're faced with the challenge of our daily circumstances. Right now, for many of us, juggling life at home, juggling schooling and parenting, juggling our work versus everything else that's going on at home, juggling the care of our loved ones and our elderly loved ones. Our fear comes from the feeling, I just can't take it anymore. I can't do it. How will I cope today, or how will I cope tomorrow? Juggling the emotions of accepting old age, juggling the worries of finances, juggling the concern about where will my work be in the future. And this week, the fear for so many, as we watch the news over the last month or so of Ahmaud Arbery or George Floyd, or the actions of Amy Cooper, and things for many people just seem to be even worse than they were 50 years ago. And you fear that you're supposed to protect those that are supposed to protect you and your loved ones. The fear comes from them. You fear the future for your children. And perhaps you find yourself saying, I can't take it anymore. What do you do when you wake up in the morning and you put your feet on the floor and you take those first few steps into the day and you're gripped with a fear about the challenge of the day that you're about to face? There's an incredible story in the New Testament. It's the story of when Jesus walks on water. Talk about fearless. I'll read the story to you. Now, how do you hold one of these? I can't remember. Oh no, that's right, you hold it open. Here's the story. It's from Mark's Gospel, chapter 6. Jesus made his disciples get into a boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida, while he dismissed the crowd. After leaving them, he went up onto a mountainside to pray. Later that night, the boat was in the middle of the lake, and he was alone on the land. He saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. Shortly before dawn, he went out to them, walking on the lake. He was about to pass them by. But when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost. They cried out because they all saw him and were terrified. Immediately he spoke to them and said, "Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid." Then he climbed into the boat with them, and the wind died down. They were completely amazed, for they had not understood about the loaves. Their hearts were hardened. It's an incredible story. In Jesus' day, the people were terrified of the sea. They referred to the Sea of Galilee as the abyss. It was a fearsome place of darkness and chaos, and even more so when the wind got up and a storm began to develop. Jesus had sent his disciples on ahead of him to sail across the sea while Jesus went off to a quiet place to pray. The storm had pushed those disciples and their boat into the middle of the lake, and the rough water was tossing the boat about, and the disciples were straining at the oars. Just notice one or two things about the story. The story indicates that Jesus allowed his disciples to struggle for some time. It tells us that Jesus came to them in the fourth watch of the night, so they had probably been out rowing on the water for between 6 and 8 hours. Why does he do that? Why does he leave them to struggle in their circumstances? Could it be that it's as they struggle that they begin to think about who it is that they truly put their trust in? Then he comes to them walking on the water. He doesn't walk straight to them. In fact, the story tells us he walks by them. Why does he do that? Could it be that, as it were, Jesus doesn't want to babysit them? He wants them to make a choice about whether they cry out to him or not. And they do. Jesus speaks into their lives at that very moment when they cry out, and he says to them, "Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid." And it's when they cry out to Jesus that he comes into their circumstance, into their situation, and he calms the storm. But notice this too. They're still on the water. They're still in their circumstance. They're still in the place of fear and chaos. And in Matthew's version of the story, one of the disciples, Peter, who sees Jesus on the water, actually says to him, "If that's you, Lord, call me to come out to you on the water." And Jesus says to him, "Come." He invites him to join him in a place that he finds so fearful. And Peter gets out of the boat and he takes those first few tentative steps onto the water, and he walks toward Jesus, and then he has a moment where he looks down at the waves, he sees the fear again, and he begins to sink, and he cries out, and the text says that Jesus reaches out to him and takes hold of him, and he's safe once again. Peter feared less, as it were, when he took hold of the hand of Jesus. And for us, whatever our day may hold, or whatever situation we're faced with, that's the key to living a fearless life. It's who you put your trust in as you step out into the challenge. When we step out into our day, when we face huge situations that we face right now, we put our trust in all sorts of things to try and deal with our fear. Some simply reach for comfort. I'll stay behind my closed door. I'll remain in the boat, as it were. I just won't get involved. I won't take up the challenge. Some reach for some kind of substance, a drink or a drug, just to calm their fear. Some let go of all they've ever believed in and just surrender to the fear itself and just live with huge anxiety. But Peter reaches out to Jesus in his fear, and he surrenders himself to him. Every time I've taken a step into a new challenge, or a challenge that comes my way that makes me feel fearful, the key I've realised is that we need to daily surrender our lives to Jesus. That the key to dealing with fear is about who we surrender our trust to. But why would you surrender your trust to Jesus? It might sound pathetic for some of the challenges that we're facing right now to say, well, put your trust in Jesus. I put my trust in Jesus because he took the first step into our chaos. In the book of Philippians, the writer says of Jesus, who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on the cross. What the writer's saying is that Jesus, on our behalf, steps out of heaven, as it were, gives up his home in order to step towards us and to rescue us. In a sense, Jesus surrenders himself to us. Throughout the life of Jesus, he stepped into so many situations in order to restore and heal and redeem a broken world. He stepped into all the areas that we fear, and he showed us a new way. He demonstrated that he is Lord of it all. He stepped into the stormy waters of race relations and displayed how his world and his way of doing things would be better. And he let people know that at his party, all tribes of the earth are welcome. He stepped into the stormy waters of women's place in the world, and he raised the value of women. He stepped out into the fear, or our fear, of death, and showed that he is even the Lord of our greatest fear, death itself. He stepped into the stormy waters of slavery, the marginalised and the oppressed. And when the religious structures kept those people away from worshipping, Jesus stepped out and he took the worship to them so that they knew that they were included. That's why, for me, when we are filled with fear, that's why we can take Jesus by the hand and allow him to teach us his way, because he has stepped into all the situations we find ourselves feeling fearful in. My mother-in-law was an incredible woman who wore the shoes of a fearless lady. She had a fridge magnet on her fridge that said, "Be the kind of woman that when your feet touch the floor in the morning, the devil says, 'Oh no, she's up.'" So tomorrow, when you wake in the morning faced with all the challenges that we're faced with right now, as you turn out of your bed and put your feet on the floor, and the waves of fear begin to wash over your feet, when you feel like you can't take it anymore, may you cry out to Jesus. May you take him by the hand, and may you surrender your day, your life to him. And may you see him make all the difference as he gives you courage to face your tasks, strength for the day ahead, and a wisdom that is way beyond yourself. As you go into this week, may you find yourself feeling more fearless than you have done before.
You call me out upon the waters, the great unknown, where feet may fail, and there I find you in the mystery, in oceans deep, my faith will stand. I take me deeper than my feet could ever wander. My faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander. My faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander. And my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. And I will call upon your name. Keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace. For I am yours, and you are mine. And I will call upon your name and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace. For I am yours, and you are mine. I am yours, and you are mine.
Thanks so much for joining us this morning. We just want to say that here at Balham Baptist Church, we absolutely love our community. We love this diverse family that gather together each week to worship God, and we love the community of Balham, and that this week we stand with you. If you can join us at 11:15 this morning on Zoom, we would love to see you then too. God bless.